Yes, guys, a quick recap from the Geelong versus Hawthorn practice game from yesterday. Probably the first time we've got to see two teams that are sort of right at the top of their game, two teams that could be competing deep into finals, into that sort of top four area of the AFL. So a few things to take away, particularly with the game style. Geelong were absolutely awesome at controlling the territory in this game particularly, but also where they won the ball back on the field, I think was really interesting. They trapped Hawthorn deep in their defensive 50. I think in the first quarter, Hawthorn had 7 or 8 kickouts, and they seemed to, Geelong sort of allowed them to take that first short kick into the pockets, and then the next deep kick, Hawthorn just really couldn't get out of that zone, and it was either from an aerial intercept, someone like a Tom Stewart coming across. Hawthorn were trying to get the ball in those contests to Amabi Chol, who was sort of operating as that focal point inside forward 50, but also to come up the ground and compete in those contests. But he just wasn't able to really lay enough physical pressure on the likes of Tom Stewart and those other interceptors for Geelong. So whether he marked it or the ball just came to ground, and then you had that little mosquito fleet of Geelong players, it felt like they had an extra player on the field at those ground level contests, whether it was, a Dempsey, Graham Myers was around there close, those sorts of players just buzzing around and creating chaos. From a midfield perspective, I liked what Geelong did moving a few bodies through there. They had, obviously, Max Holmes, who's super dynamic, and he's going to be some player in the next couple of years just with that explosive burst that he has from stoppage. They had Mitch Nevitt going through, and it was interesting just to see how he kind of looked at the AFL level. His defensive pressure was really good, and he gives them an option as that kind of anchor-type midfielder, the one that sits at the back. But you've also got Atkins, who is probably going to come in for the 2025 season and play that role. So I think he would be an injury-dependent type one there. Other players that went through there, obviously Bailey Smith, the new signing that they've got there. He gave them so much run and, again, kind of gave that appearance that you were watching an extra player on the field for Geelong. They just seem to be running and covering the ground so well. They obviously play that field really well, how they intercept the skinny boundaries and force teams into the pocket. Hawthorn didn't really get too much going, if I'm honest. They had some really nice moments from some of their big players, like Will Day was absolutely awesome in the midfield. Some of the clearances that he won and sort of the combination work between he, Warple and Newcomb was really strong. Day's just, he's going to be such a weapon, just the fact that he can play oversized for what he is. Like, his aerial ability is absolutely amazing, but then he moves like a small midfielder. He's sort of got that rangy skinniness where he can kind of grab the ball, has that excellent reach. But one thing that I noticed in this game particularly was it looks like he has got a little bit, more physically strong through the core. He stood up in some big tackles and was able to get a handball out or sort of drive his legs through the stoppage. So big year incoming potentially for Will Day after, at times last year, coming back from injury and that sort of thing, he didn't really put it all together on his sort of breakout year from the year before. So that's going to be really exciting for Hawthorn fans. As far as their stuff forward of the ball, I wasn't really too impressed with anything. At times, they sort of opened up the field and looked at what we saw last year of them with creating all of that space, but they were obviously missing a lot of those small forwards, Watson, Ginnivan. Finn McGuinness actually kicked a couple of goals down there, which was really interesting, but they weren't able to get a lot going. We saw some signs of those interceptors that they brought in, and I'm talking about Josh Battle there. He kind of combined with Sicily. They were doing some work back there, and Frost was the other key position player. We didn't get to see Barras in this game, so a little bit under strength. And probably the only other player that I wanted to talk about was Hardwick. I think he looks really dangerous and looks like he's going to be a force for them forward of the ball. Going back to Geelong and some of across the entire Geelong team, there were just so many things to be excited about with the future. Looking at someone like a Connor O'Sullivan, he took some really nice intercept marks, and probably someone I should have mentioned off the top that was kind of making that wall and just blocking Hawthorn into their defensive half. You look at someone like a Shannon Neal, he just looked... That first game that I did a preview of with Western Bulldogs and Essendon, I mentioned the impact that Sam Darcy was going to have close to goal. And I think Neal's another one like this. Like, he's a really big body. He's super athletic. He jumps at the ball. He looks really competitive. And I think that's going to be an absolute handful for teams. And when you think about the forwards that are going to come into that team, like Tyson Stengel at ground level, you already had Brian Myers in this game playing as that more higher half forward. He was buzzing around the 50, kicking darts inside 50 to players like Jeremy Cameron. So just so much going on for Geelong. And we haven't even talked about Sam De Koning playing as a solo ruck in this game. Now, I don't think necessarily the performance was particularly good, but obviously Sam De Koning, such a product that we saw in his first year win the premiership with him as a key position defender. So he's obviously got the talent to be able to do this. We've seen what his brother's done in the AFL, being that bash and crash physical style ruckman that's just sort of all action. And I think Sam De Koning can become that for Geelong and revitalise this midfield. They've worked heavily off a game plan that's been very dominant towards transition phases of the game, winning the ball back, like I said. But Sam De Koning could give them just another little bit of a bite in there, and injecting players like a Holmes into the midfield from last year. You're starting to get some real dynamism in there. The other thing to talk about here is Patrick Dangerfield, who went into the forward line. So I think we're going to see that a lot more as they try to regenerate this midfield, rejig things. Dangerfield goes into the forward half of the ground. He is yet another player that if you're moving the ball really quickly, either on transition or straight out of the clearance, he's someone that can win contests forward of the ball and is going to be super, super damaging for Geelong. So much to be excited about. And overall in this game, I know I've talked about Geelong a lot and not so much about Hawthorn. There was obviously a lot more. I mean, this was a dominant game. I can't remember what the score was in the end. I didn't watch it even all the way through the fourth quarter as they started to make those changes. It was a pretty long game, but certainly more to like from a Geelong perspective in this game. And I think Hawthorn, a lot of players out. It was just sort of an early hit out for them to kind of feel things out. And I think we'll see better things from them as they get players back and deeper into the preseason. But it was just good to see, I guess, two solid teams, two high-end teams compete against each other. That is a wrap for this video, guys, and I'll see you next time.